Some of these are going to come to all of you and some to one of you at a time, but all of you can cash in. Would Jennifer Hecht agree that a person in great pain from terminal illness, self-induced euthanasia, suicide, if and only if he first assessed the impact on others important to that person and then determined that they would understand?
I'll say yes. Look, there's always cases that are outlier cases. Even, I mean, we know murder is wrong, but the state does it sometimes. And there are some cases that we allow individuals to. If a person had no one else agreeing with them, and yet they themselves knew how they felt and thought about the effects it would have on other people and made that decision, that's certainly reasonable. Morality is fuzzy all the time when you get to the edges. The point is to at least make sure the person remembers they're valuable. When I first started having these ideas, I was on a listserv, so that dates it a little bit. It's a couple of years ago, and I mentioned I'm not at all talking about end-of-life care. That's a totally different thing. And someone on the listserv said, I'm disabled and not long for this world, and my community needs your message too. We feel pressured to not be a burden to others, and sometimes we find out that the people taking care of us desperately don't want us to go. That we're thinking we're a burden, and they're thinking that they love us, and somehow we're not communicating. They actually have a group called Not Dead Yet from the Monty Python. I mean, and that matters. So what I'm trying to do is bring up the conversation that you might not know how much you matter to other people, and that through history, we have had a better sense that sometimes pain is valuable. Most great leaders, great artists have gone through some excruciating pain. Now, I would take away anybody's pain anytime. I'm an American. But you can't. And since you can't, let's remember that there's some value to it. And let's remember that there's some value to helping someone who's in pain. And that sometimes the greatest part of our life is taking care of someone who needs us. So at least let's have the conversation. But yeah, absolutely, I believe there are outliers all over the place. Thank you.
I have one here for Jamila. Alarming and disgusting history you recounted, thank you. But how well known in the black community are all of these accounts of abuses in the name of science?
Fabulous question. The black community as monolith, thinks alike, votes alike, is alike, does not exist. I write extensively about that. I don't exist. I'm a black woman who says I'm an atheist. That said, for the purposes of this conversation, black community, dark-skinned people with ancestry coming from Africa in the United States today. Shoot. They know. They know. I am well researched. I've read the books. I'm friends with some of the authors. I am better informed. I can give you dates. I can give you cohorts. I've got a baby sister who taught me how to read clinical trial studies. So I know what I'm looking for, and I have the background to do the historic research to understand it. You'll hear specifics from me, but what you will hear from a woman who's got her baby in a clinic in Louisiana is, hold on, wait a minute. Wait a minute. What's in that needle? Hold on. Didn't you release the flu over some city one time to see what it would do? People know incidents. They know facts, but they are not specific about it. They know enough to be skeptical. Some are paranoid. However, as we saw with the white mommy with 7 babies with whooping cough who says, oh, now I'm pro-vax. She's all over the internet today. I can't remember her name. But that anti-science, anti-intellect, We'll talk. We'll talk. You know, a funny aside, but I'm too ADD to attend to it, so I'm going to go back to anti-vax mommy. You know, in the U.S., we lionize beautiful blondes whose claim to fame was that they were on an MTV game show as eye candy, and now millions take their medical expertise from her. So this fear of the unknown science that Texas and Louisiana refuses to teach our kids, that many Americans aren't getting in school. It affects us all. Black folks know Tuskegee. Black folks know sterilization. Black folks know about the radiation treatments. They might not know that those were cancer patients, but they know that black people got pumped full of radiation to the point that they dropped dead after their gums bled and their teeth fell out and their hair fell out, and they got these ulcers that broke through the skin. They know that. They don't understand, you know, so I belabor. I need to have a drink. I didn't have one. And King Google helps to make people even more informed. Big asterisks, but that's what's going on. It's people know. People are related to people who can tell them.
Okay, I've got one really for all three of you, and so I'm going to start it with Anna, but it's from this audience. Is it not more important to teach individuals to unconditionally accept themselves than to gain meaning from others and their support?
Yeah, it's just that we've been too dependent on the individual idea. Of course, we support the idea of having individual strength, of having individual meaning, of making purpose by yourself. It's just that we do it to the exclusion of talking about the community, and this habit of saying that atheists realize that we need to make meaning on our own. Well, yeah, that's true, but nobody's saying that the meaning is also inherent in community and history and culture. And look, none of this is true the way atomic numbers are true, but it's true the way love seems to be a consistent human thing. It's true the way we can see that there are patterns, and that if we take a step back and look at what happens after a suicide, how many people are touched or moved. There are ways that we can help nurture the notion that culture is important. Look, I for what it's worth, I was born in 1965. The world that I was educated into told me that the First World War sort of destroyed the notion of culture as a point of meaning. That for Europe, that so loved itself, that so thought it was the height of all culture, God was an Englishman, and to then realize that we could put Europe through this hamburger grinder that was World War I, and then to do it again, but do it in this horrific way, magnified by new technology. Though what happened with the First World War was because of machine guns and barbed wire. Those were new inventions, and it created a new war. Well, the new technologies of the Second World War. We'd had hate before, but we hadn't seen it enacted in that way. So by the time you get to someone educated in the 70s and 80s, I was taught, culture's broken, we're postmodern, it's over, and the best you can do is be a decent human being to the people just around you and don't stick your neck out. Well, maybe it's time we rethink. Maybe it's time we look at the vast majority of human history and see that people through history have tried to make culture and community worth living for, and to at least encourage the notion, to at least rethink if maybe we can try once again to think that art and beauty are worth talking about. I think the 21st century needs to at least rethink. And I don't think the young people today are being taught that particular arc. I don't think they know that it's in the last 100 years that we lost certain faith in art and beauty. And I think it's time to rethink it.
But look, when we talk about a critical disease like a terminal one, don't you think that we should exclusively rely on how we feel about it? We are dying. We are in the proximity of death. I do understand that people might have lots of problem with that, especially those who are dying. But what I wanted to say, I was not born in an individualistic society. On the contrary, I'm coming from a communistic society. I was born and raised there, and then I came here 20 years ago. I might tell you, related to that, and putting into a context my presentation, I've been absolutely, extremely sad when my uncle died 2 years ago of a colon cancer. And when I saw his sons, I was not there, in the rest of the family, witnessing that amazing suffering. He was completely disfigured after having a surgery. And nobody wanted to call the doctors or to have a nurse or to have a hospital was there just to give him some sedation. So what is so tragic about this kind of death, cancer, is that your brain still works, but the body doesn't respond. And the pain is absolutely excruciating. And it pains me to think that in Eastern Europe, at this point, it is almost impossible to open a discussion about the right to die. People are not exposed to that. Now, going back to your question, don't you think, or all of you, that when we are in such an extreme situation, a limited one, don't you think that we have the right, really, to rely on our own choice? And I think we do. And I think we do. And I don't know if the community or the family or the, I understand all those values, but I think, again, putting everything in that context, is there a right to die? I think it should be.
All right, I think this one is mostly for Jamila, but maybe for all three of you. What can we as supporters and educators do to encourage more humanist involvement in facilitating broader participation in organ donation in minority communities?
We are, we absolutely are a minority community, and part of it, I think, has to do with competent cultural communication. For those who, I think it's important that people see people who they find something in common with. Too often, I'll put it this way. There are a lot of movies I don't like where the Conrack was a great movie, but, you have this liberal white teacher going to these backward black people and teaching them something because they don't know nothing except folksy stuff. They're very good at folksy stuff. When you have models who look like the community, who think like the community, are competent in the language of the community that you're trying to talk to, that is important. How happy would we be to have someone from the sect that Mother Teresa worked with to come in here and go, Jennifer's right here, but you have been bought at a goodly price, and you do not own yourself. You stay. Stay. Forgive me, it's the same message. You are more valuable than you're giving yourself credit for being. There are others who rely on you. We are greater because you are. It's the same message, but one of us is talking to us and one of us is talking at us and taking a whole lot of money from the church, tax exempt, whatever. I'm not going to go off on that tangent, but it's important that you talk to the people, you understand their needs. That's the most important thing, and that's the problem. We don't have enough women in STEM communication. We don't have enough black people. We certainly don't have enough Latinas. There is better than the model minority of Asians in STEM fields. We sure as hell do not have enough Southerners in science communication. We do not have enough poor people in science communication. We do not have people who come from community colleges in science education, science communication. We've got a lot of work to do, so what we can do is start identifying some of these people and put them on our mailing list. We can start inviting them to speak. We can start showing up at events that they go to. We can start writing letters to the editor and saying, University College, Baltimore County has a fabulous science program. Why are you only ever quoting Johns Hopkins? Baltimore just won a major grant. Why the hell is it always a white dude you're asking a question? You've got a whole bunch of other people who weren't even born in the U.S. who are leading the research, and they're not all South Asians. What is your problem? I buy your paper, and I'm going to keep writing to you until you fix it. We can do that.
It's about organ donation, and we've been working a lot on that. I have a question for you, and raise your hand if you think it shouldn't be private. How many of you have signed to be organ donors upon death? Oh, super impressive. How many of you would donate a kidney, being living donors, to some other humanist?
Do we know this person?
I don't know. I say some other humanist. Let's say it is the case that you might, okay. Oh, you do, okay. So, all right, thank you. I think we are doing very well, at least with this audience here. Now, what I wanted to say is that people do not know about organ donation in general. And if you think about a curious case, in New York State, actually, is the last but one among the states in the United States with the lowest cadaveric organ donations. Did you know that? Cuomo always is having all sorts of speeches. Oh, we should find more creative ways to urge New Yorkers to donate. We should, Bloomberg gave $1 million, not much, that's almost nothing. And they had an experimental Bellevue Hospital a couple of years ago to see if they can raise the number of organs in the emergency room. There are so many accidents. And yet, the New York State has is the last but one having the lowest organ donation rates. Now, we don't get into discussions about living donation. You can donate your kidney to a person who is in need. But I think it's critical, and I think many organizations who have the main mission, like Kidney Foundation, to raise awareness of organ donation, they agree that there is no enough awareness. People do not know. People do not know where to sign up. People fear. Still, there are people, and I met one of my board members, I'm not saying who, recently, and I was completely surprised. She would say that, look, given the debate between brain death and cardiac arrest, she's almost sure that the medical doctors can make a mistake. And she fears to sign up. And at least I appreciated that she was sincere, but I think there are many people in this situation. Speaking about minorities, if I'm allowed, around New York City, there are so many. There are very few organizations going there and raising awareness about the need in organs. About 21 Americans are dying daily of an organ failure, and about 18 are dying daily in New York State. It is a tremendous issue. And despite the advancement of technology, despite the perfection of organ transplantation surgery, now it's really non-invasive because they are really they are doing laparoscopically, you know, through the computer, but there are not sufficient organs. So again, speaking about that, if you want to know more about, we have 2 transplant surgeons, and one is on our board, the director of the Renal Transplantation Division, Dr. Bruce Gelb at NYU, an expert in that, and he knows more about this issue than anyone else, and Dr. Lloyd Radner at the Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia University. Amazing people, and we will organize an event, public event, during the summer school. If you're around New York City, those people will be on the panel and they will also lecture. So I think we should partner. Look, I worked for Humanists before, but I think we should find ways to partner if indeed this issue seems to concern you. I don't know, is that a secret? Who asked that question? Uh-oh, the person left.
I've got a follow-up to it, so stay here for a minute.
Okay. No,
Do you have affiliations with other countries who promote body part donations, some of which are illegal organizations?
me? Oh. That's fine. No. No, yeah. That's funny. So let me see if I understood the question. You know why it's funny? Because we had an event and a fellow came to us. You know, people are people. You have to understand them. And I said, look, is your organization dealing with organ trafficking? No. If so, we would be so rich because only one kidney trafficked cost about $200,000. That was my answer. I mean, it was a crazy question to ask. But anyway, so if I have affiliation, if we have affiliation to any organizations outside the U.S. who actually promote what?
Well, I think the question was, are we aware of them and are we helping people distinguish between them?
That's what we have doing. We organized events exactly or precisely, and we invited also representatives of various governments at the United Nations where organ trafficking is rampant. And we wanted them to acknowledge that, and of course they didn't, because the majority of the countries don't want to acknowledge that. And then let me tell you about the US. The US mission, you know about the organ trafficking which took place in Brooklyn, 2009. With the Rabbi Rosenbaum, I think is his name. He's in jail right now. So it was a big scandal. He was trafficking Israeli, and the transplantations would take place at Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. All right, so we know about them. We have an amazing film that you would like to watch. It's not ours. It belongs to HBO, Tales from the Organ Trade. That film would absolutely make you think about organ trafficking, very much so. And even though you do not have relatives or friends who are on dialysis, I'm telling you, watching that film, which was made by 2 directors from Canada, and you can, if you have the HBO subscriptions, you can watch that. We had an event with them. Will make you pose many questions. So if there are solutions, I think that might be local solutions. And again, if you are concerned with that, I am not asking how many humanists. It's impressive that almost all of you are organ donors upon death. But I did not ask because I would like to know how many humanists or humanist organizations have been involved in raising awareness of organ donation. You're working with students, you're working with universities, you have all sorts of groups. I mean, I think there should be a way, or there should be a way to collaborate with us if you want. Send them to attend our summer school. They'll become perfect activists.
When we could not invite a man by the name of Hitchens to the conference. But the question is, can we discuss the culture that lionizes Mother Teresa and the belief that there is beauty and perhaps art in suffering?
I haven't really studied Mother Teresa's behavior and everything. I just know that somebody who hears God once and then never for the rest of her life. Remember when they were trying to make her a saint and they sent in these documents that showed that she'd really only heard him once and then the rest of the time is just full of doubt. It's like, what do you call a person who hears a call once and then spends the rest of their life petting dying babies? I call him a frickin' saint. I mean, there's just such a kindness to it, though I know there are these limitations, but I don't know much about, I haven't studied her. I'm just saying that the other part of that question was about finding beauty in pain and suffering, which religions have gone way overboard, especially Catholicism, you know, the idea of put a pebble in your shoe to sort of buy good treatment back. And the Jews can do it at times also, this kind of suffering in exchange for something. And like I said, I would take away pain if I could. I kind of like that the human condition will never be free of pain entirely because we are so ambivalent that no matter, even if we had everything, we wouldn't know in which order to have it. You know, we would be upset about, and that pain is who we have always been. And I have a great investment in that experience. However, the way I look at it is from a stance of reality. We are in pain. Where can we find some way of coping with it that allows us to see that there are things that we learn from it? If only the humility to not be a jerk. You know, you go through something agonizing and you're just gentler with other people some of the time. So, yeah, it's one of these situations that I would change it if I could, but because we can't, let's look at the fact that there is something in there. But I am not talking about end-of-life care. I do not think end-of-life pain is necessary, and I think that's entirely up to the individual. You know, it's just sometimes, as a poet and a philosopher, you have to say, the bookshelf of our common humanity right now is missing a volume. We need to also be talking about this. I don't need to convince everyone. I don't know that I'm always convinced of all my positions at all times, but I do say this needs to be on the shelf. We need to have this too. And the idea of finding some of the strange beauty of the anguish of being human, sometimes we need to have access to that too.
Beautiful question. Poetically, philosophically, yes. Suffering from love, it's very inspiring. And I should say, and I'm not the only one, or at least I subscribe to the thought that love is suffering in all its forms. Although we don't even know if those forms, you know, not all people agree with all of those, they love, how can I say, the category that Plato was talking about, that the ancient were talking about. Agape, philia, love for your parents, for your relatives. Eros, erotic love. We all know what that is. maybe. And then did I say unconditional love is agape? That all religion, I think, or almost all religions are based upon. Now, yes, it's beauty. It is a kind of beauty in that type of suffering, but I don't think suffering from diseases and having no choice to end that has any beauty in it. And I think you yourself agree with that. So, but it's a beautiful question. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, suffering from love inspires us.
Is the incidence of suicide higher in high-pressure colleges? And how are they handling to prevent it?
Yeah, so suicide in colleges right now is on the rise. It just just outdid death by alcohol, which is shocking. It never had before. And in the general population, it just outdid death by car accidents, which is it's mind-boggling because that was the way we died for a long time. So the question is with colleges and the military, look, maybe it's an aside, but we're all aware that the suicide rate in the Army has gone up exponentially lately, and it has in the last 10 years. However, it is not now higher than the same age and gender cohorts in the rest of the population, or the last numbers were a tiny bit higher. So what I'm saying is, it's that the Army used to be protective. For the last 100 years, since Durkheim, that we've been checking statistically, the Army was protective because we lived in communal situations in the Army. But the barracks are going away, and the communal television room, everybody's got their own little room now and their own TV, and so what was protective about the Army seems to be going away. So we're not now in a situation where what we are in, as with the colleges, is here's a community where someone's in charge, and someone is valuing these people in a very specific way that matters to their, I hate to say it, but career, right? So the president of a university sees that the suicide rate is high there, or the sexual harassment or sexual molestation rate is high there. It's not necessarily that it's higher than in the rest of the population, but no one is in a caretaking role with the rest of the population. So you hear about it more. And that's what's going on a lot with the Army too. So are the high pressure schools doing worse with suicide? Not that I've seen, but I'm not sure. What I have seen is that we see people who look happy, who no one among their friends or family say were depressed, who fail an exam or do something that they think makes them, that humiliates them. Maybe in front of one person in their mind, they feel they can't face it. And we lose them. Most people who kill themselves in this country are older white men, by far. Older white men. Now, whether young black men kill themselves by behaving in such a dangerous way that they get themselves killed, that has been posited. Younger white men, when we have celebrity suicide, we see a rise in the population of people of that age and gender, a spike for about 3 months. Little rise in the rest of the population, but age and gender, and who knows what else, but those two are easily, but people who feel same profession sometimes. But when we've looked at some of these rises, we've seen a young man commit suicide in the public eye, and we don't see the blip in suicide, but guess what? When we check single car accidents, we see the blip. So sometimes suicide is hidden by methodology, right? So what I meant to say when I brought up that older white men are the ones who are killing themselves in the most numbers is that with younger people, it's more of a dramatic story, and it's more painful for the culture and for individuals. And so how do you parse this? How do you parse the worth of and value of a life? I don't know. There's a lot of ways of doing it, but So when we say what's going on in these schools, it's hard for us to measure the amount of distress we feel over a particular loss and the numbers involved compared to, you know, does it matter if losing this particular person because they were young and beautiful and educated, and we wanted to believe that if anyone could make it, they could. So it hurts everybody worse than somebody who we think, oh, well, they know their own mind. A young person, under 25, your brain isn't even finished developing. It's painful to think that somebody whose prefrontal cortex isn't finished is going to decide whether or not they're going to make it. You know, these people need to be told, hang on, you don't know yet. Your prefrontal cortex is how you figure out how to get your goals met. And wait, you don't know. An older person, you say, all right, at least they had some time to think this through. We don't always know if that's true, but it's not as upsetting. So parsing the numbers, are the most pressurized colleges worse? Don't know. I can imagine a situation in which everybody at Princeton knows that they're sweating, and so take care of each other in a different way, whereas the one super smart kid at the University of whatever feels like if I fail, I'm losing my identity. Right, so it's unclear, and
Any statistics? Is there any difference between the rates of suicide in private schools versus state schools?
that too, as far as I know, no. And again, what I sort of meant to lean on a little bit more clearly in my original talk to you is that suicide is profoundly influential. It's contagious. Whether you talk about suicide clusters or social modeling, or contagion, or influence, when someone in a school does it, it's very likely that there will be a rise in that place. And that goes for professions and a whole lot of other sort of categories.
Just speaking about the contagion, maybe culturally, you look at Northern Europe or Japan. Isn't in Japan the leading cause of death is suicide, or in wealthy European countries?
Well, he's asking about these different places. I have to say, when I wrote Doubt: A History, it was really important to me to look at all at atheism and disbelieving the general cultural religious belief all over the world. With this book, I really was concentrating on the Western situation. Even Durkheim, 115 years ago, and Durkheim's he was really the first. He's the first sociologist, though there were people who called themselves sociologists before. His big book on suicide is the first book that's dependent on statistics in a way that looks like sociology today. And Durkheim said there's two kinds, well, he says there's four, but I'm boiling it down to two. There's suicide because you're not enough enmeshed in the society. And that's what he thought was going on in the Western world. We'd lost our guilds, we'd lost our religion, we'd lost all these things that were mandatory groupings. And he said the other main kind is when you're too enmeshed in the society. So you feel that in order to save the reputation of your culture or your family, you kill yourself to get out of the way because you care so much more about the external grouping than yourself. And nowadays, the East and West are communicating so much, it's very hard to make that hard distinction. Nevertheless, when you're talking about suicide in the East, you're talking about something that is, you're more likely to see a feeling of social pressure that people felt, oh, you did this, time for you to go. Whereas in this culture, you're getting more pressure to not do it, but there are reasons that we can't hear that information. But you're absolutely right. And I think with Western Europe, as compared to other places, that is a matter of religion. Religion does some bad things and some good things, but you know, it definitely helped some people put off. It doesn't anymore. I read suicide notes, and they say, I think God will forgive me. It seems to no longer be working, but it was for a while. And I think Western Europe, it is somewhat atheism, and not having anyone have ever said there are secular reasons not to.
The beginning of an exciting conference. If I could have summarized the breadth of humanism, I would have said data and discussion and responsibility for improving the culture. You've heard a bit about it tonight. You're going to hear a lot more about it tomorrow. See you in the morning.